And now, the tale of the tape for Vitali Klitschko against Manuel Charr. A 13-year, 9-month age advantage for Charr. 4-inch height advantage for Klitschko. Arm length advantage of 3 inches for the champion. And he weighed in about 7 pounds heavier than his now German-based opponent, Manuel Charr. Let's go to Moscow for the opening bell in Moscow Olympic Stadium between Klitschko and Charr.
There is a political component or subtext to this fight because Vitali Klitschko has been so active in democratic reform movement in his native Ukraine, which used to be a part of the Soviet Union. Manuel Stewart expressed a kind of anxiety that he was fighting for the first time in Moscow tonight.
Stewart saying that as a friend, he has no particular official connection to Vitali Klitschko. He has the unofficial connection, of course, of training Vitali's brother Vladimir. As round one gets underway, Charr at first was staying back, trying to get a look at what Klitschko wanted to do, and now Klitschko seems ready and willing, Max Kellerman, to go forward.
I think the big question heading into this fight is, will Klitschko's body break down at the age of 41? He's had shoulder issues in the past, the bad cut against Lennox, and as fighters age, they tend to be injured more easily. Will his body break down before he can break down Charr?
Klitschko's last title defense against Derek Chisora wound up being perhaps closer and more difficult than he might have anticipated after he tore a shoulder ligament in the 3rd round. It was in his left shoulder, which hampered his jab for the remainder of the fight. But he's using the jab freely and liberally right now as he begins to put the attack on Manuel Charr. CompuBox numbers showed us that Charr is, by habit, a slow starter. And in terms of his own punch output, he's off to a slow start here.
You see how he plays defense. He puts his gloves up high, tucks his elbows, and just tries to block. You could see the difference in amateur background watching these two guys right now. Vitali, with a deep amateur background, does things without thinking about them, or thinks about them very quickly and then does them. In Charr, you can see him thinking and then executing.
Charr's first in-the-ring combat experience was in Muay Thai kickboxing. At age 16, eventually he gravitated into a boxing gym, had a very brief amateur career, and his first professional fight at age 20, about 5 months before his 21st birthday. That was 7 years ago. It's been a big first round for Vitali Klitschko, who has been only slightly threatened, though Charr landed an uppercut in that exchange.
So far, Vitali trying to keep Charr at the end of the jab. Sees this kind of shell defense that Charr is using and is trying to figure out a way to penetrate it without exposing himself to too much risk. Stepping around a little bit, going to the body, trying to figure it out.
Charr missing, Vitali Klitschko landing down the stretch of round one. Later to come in this telecast, the main event, Andre Ward and Chad Dawson.
I got a lot at stake, and Andre Ward has a lot at stake too. I'm telling you right now, Chad Dawson's up for this fight. I'm gonna put in the work, and I'm gonna show everybody why I think I'm the best 160-pounder in the world.
Every fight is a statement fight, and every single fight I want to go out there and outdo my last performance. What better than to do it against the light heavyweight champion, making a bold move to come down to 168 pounds to challenge me for my belt.
Andre Ward and Chad Dawson face off for Ward's Super Middleweight Championship later tonight in our main event. Ward has the advantages of fighting on his home court, so to speak, and fighting in the weight class he chose years ago as his own. Dawson has the advantages of being, by nature, the larger man, and also taller, a southpaw with a very smooth boxing style. As round two begins, there's a nick outside the right eye of Manuel Charr and an abrasion on the right eyelid of Manuel Charr. Marks of some of the damage Klitschko was able to do in round number one, and he lands a stiff jab there that moves Charr back. Larry Merchant, your thoughts so far?
I find myself a little surprised at how offensive Vitali Klitschko has been in the early going, and he's probably seen what we all have known about Charr, that he does this in the early rounds and hopes to extend the fight, and maybe thinks that he can extend Klitschko past his 41st birthday to his retirement.
Charr's defense makes him a sitting duck for Vitali on the outside. But I think you're right, Larry. He figures if he can weather the storm early, maybe Vitali's age is to Charr's advantage late.
It's possible, going back to what we discussed before, that if Klitschko wins an election next month for parliament in the Ukraine, this could be his last fight.
Vitali Klitschko had a 4-year hiatus in his career between 2004 and 2008, product of a series of injuries which continually interrupted his training sessions, particularly as he attempted to set up a fight with Asim Rahman of the United States. But since coming back in 2008, he's won 9 straight fights and barely lost a round.
And it's amazing that at his age, after a 4-year layoff, I know the division is weak. The heavyweight division's been weak in the Klitschko era. But here's some names he's dominated. Chris Arreola, Thomas Adamek, Derek Chisora. Those are kind of the best guys around, and they weren't really in those fights.
And all of them considerably more accomplished than Manuel Charr, who was ridiculed by some as an opponent coming in and is taking some heavy punishment with 40 seconds to go in round number 2. It's past 1 a.m. in Moscow. The Klitschkos are accustomed to fighting before jam-packed stadiums in Germany. If you catch a wide shot here, you may see some empty seats. It does not appear that the Klitschko marketing power was as effective, at least in filling this stadium in Moscow, as has been the case in places like Hamburg and Cologne.
If Charr is counting on getting to the late round and tiring Klitschko out, he's going to have to land some kind of offense in the early rounds. And
there's a right hand by Charr. And Charr goes down at the end of round number 2. And it is a knockdown. And you see the count.
Er kommt und dann kannst du ihn besser abhauen.
So here we see the knockdown at the end of the round. Charr tried to create some offense, as Larry suggested, and he paid the price, and that's one of the reasons it's difficult to mount an attack against either Klitschko brother. They're long-armed, and they can punch.
And that is reportedly the first knockdown Charr has suffered in his professional boxing career.
I remember him going down against Danny Williams, but I guess that was ruled a slip, but the knockdown looked similar to that.
Round 3 in Moscow. The first 2 rounds have been thoroughly dominated by Vitali Klitschko against little-known but unbeaten opponent Manuel Charr. Charr is of Syrian lineage, born in Beirut during the Lebanese Civil War in 1984, ultimately went back to live for a period of time in Syria as a child, moved to Russia at age 5, and then eventually to Germany, where he now fights as a German.
Charr is showing the ability to reach Vitali from time to time. There was an uppercut in the first round, a right hand near the end of the second. Just then he clipped Vitali cleanly.
And it appeared to me that the knockdown came on an over-the-top right hand that Charr might not have seen because his head was down.
And he didn't look hurt to me.
you know, Klitschko has an amazing body for a 41-year-old guy who was 6'8", He weighed in for this fight at 248. He's been in the 240s roughly his entire known heavyweight career since he became a top fighter. He's taken it seriously, even though he calls it now a vacation from his political vocation these days.
It's amazing that in the Western Hemisphere, where we supposedly have a more professional culture in boxing, fighters keep missing weight and coming in out of shape. And the Eastern European amateur program has produced professionals who show up in shape every time.
And isn't this perhaps the most amazing statistics of Vitali's career, guys? 46 professional fights. In the 2 losses, a retirement due to injury against Chris Bird, a stoppage due to that horrible cut on his left eye against Lennox Lewis. He was leading on the scorecards in both those instances. So never once in his professional career